There have been so many stories about Hank Williams. His legend now shadows the frail and introverted man who spawned it. When I was first asked if I would do an episode on his life, I hesitated, just because there's been so much reported about the man. I asked myself, what can I say that hasn't already been said about this larger than life singer and songwriter? With that being said, I also realize that Hank Williams is just the epitome of what classic country backstories is all about. I mean, you can't get any more country than Your Cheatin' Heart. Williams is regarded as one of the most influential and significant musicians of the 20th century. He was instrumental in turning hillbilly music into country music. So here's our episode of Classic Country Backstories on the legendary Hank Williams.
Nashville, Tennessee, country music capital of the world, home of the Grand Ole Opry, where singers and dreamers come seeking stardom. Join me as we learn about the lives and careers of those who built this town on Classic Country Backstories.
Hiram Williams was born September 17, 1923, in Mount Olive, Alabama, a community 50 miles south of Montgomery. He was the third child of Lily and Alonzo Williams. Alonzo was a railroad engineer who served in World War I and was injured when he fell out of a truck, breaking his collarbone and receiving a severe blow to the head. The eldest Williams child, Ernest Williams, died 2 days after his birth on July 5, 1921. A year later, a daughter, Irene, was born. Hiram was born 2 years after Irene. His first name, Hiram, was misspelled on his birth certificate that was prepared and signed when he was 10 years old. He was born with a birth defect called spinal bifida occulta, a spinal cord condition. The condition made Hiram feel different from the other kids his age. He also suffered lifelong chronic pain and eventually contributed to his later addiction to drugs and alcohol. By the age of 3, Hiram sat with his mother as she played piano at the Mount Olive Baptist Church. He received his first instrument, a harmonica, at the age of 6. Hiram's family moved frequently around southern Alabama due to his father's job. In 1930, when Hiram was just 7, Alonzo developed facial paralysis. Upon visiting the Veterans Hospital in Alexandria, Louisiana, he was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. He was hospitalized for the better part of 8 years, and he was absent for most of Hiram's childhood. From this point forward, Lily assumed responsibility for the family. In 1933, Hiram was sent to live with his uncle and aunt Walter and Alice McNeil in Fountain, Alabama, while their daughter was sent to stay with Lily and attend school in Georgiana. His Aunt Alice taught him some chords on the guitar, and he began playing along at dances and in churches in the area. The following year, the Williams family moved to Greenville, Alabama, where Lily opened a boarding house next to a cotton gin. The family moved several times so that Lily could support the family. At one point, their house burned down and they lost everything. Lily continued to work and support the family. The family even grew gardens to sell vegetables. Eventually, Lily began to collect Alonzo's disability pension, which helped the family make it through the Great Depression. Several different stories have been handed down about how Hank Williams got his first guitar. Neighbors claim to have bought it for him, but his mother said that she bought it for him, a second-hand guitar, for $3.50. Hiram would tell this version as well. Hiram met up with a street performer named Rufus T-Tot Payne. Payne gave Hiram guitar lessons in exchange for money or meals cooked by Lily. Payne also taught Williams how to entertain and move to draw the crowd. He was also influenced by country acts like Roy Acuff. Hiram later credited T-Tot as giving him the only musical training he ever had. Payne stressed the importance of keeping good rhythm and timing. When the Williams family moved to Montgomery, Hiram and Payne lost touch. Eventually, he moved to Montgomery as well, but died in poverty sometime in 1939. In July of 1937, the Williams and McNeils opened a boarding house in downtown Montgomery. At this time, Hiram decided to formally change his name from Hiram to Hank. He made his first radio appearance at the age of 13. He sang and played at a talent contest at the Empire Theater and won $15, which would be equivalent to over $300 today. He sang his first original song called WPA Blues. Hank wrote the original lyrics, singing the song to the tune of Riley Puckett's Dissatisfied. By the next year, he had formed his own band, the Drifting Cowboys. Hank's mother, Lily, supported his love of music and drove him to shows throughout southern Alabama. The original members were guitarist Braxton Schufert, fiddler Freddie Beach, and upright bass player and comedian Smith Hezzy Adair. Lily Williams became the manager of the band. She booked the shows, negotiated pricing, and drove the band to some of their shows. In 1939, Hank quit school and began working full-time, playing shows, honky-tonks, and other venues they could land. Since he wasn't tied down to school any longer, the band began traveling as far as Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. Hank Williams' alcohol use became a problem while touring. Sometimes he was spending most of the revenues to support his drinking habit. Between touring schedules, Hank Williams also hosted a radio show out of Montgomery. By the 1940s, Nashville music executives were hearing his name. He was a talented singer and songwriter, but he had earned a reputation as unreliable due to the increasing use of alcohol to combat the pain. Hank Williams was medically disqualified from military service after suffering a bull riding accident during a rodeo in Texas in 1941, causing further damage to his already severely damaged back. To make matters worse, all of Hank's band members were drafted. Most of the replacements quit the band due to Williams' worsening alcoholism. In August of 1942, WSFA fired him for habitual drunkenness. Backstage during one of his performances, Hank met Roy Acuff, who warned him of the dangers of alcohol. He told Williams, "You got $1 million voice, son, but a 10-cent brain." In 1942, Hank worked for about a year and a half during the war in Mobile at Alabama's Dry Dock and Shipbuilding Company. In 1943, he met Audrey Shepard at a medicine show in Banks, Alabama. According to Audrey, her and Hank lived at a hotel in Mobile while they worked at the dry docks together for a short time. Shepard said she wanted to help Hank get his radio show back and start a band. The couple married in a Texaco gas station in Andalusia, Alabama by the Justice of the Peace. The marriage was technically not valid because it did not meet the requirement of the 60-day reconciliation period from Shepard's divorce from her last husband. Audrey Shepard also had a young daughter with her ex-husband. Under Williams' guidance, Audrey began playing bass guitar and performing in Hank's band. Hank and Audrey's marriage was often turbulent. Audrey was determined to make a mark in show business herself and insisted on singing with Hank despite her obviously limited talent. Hank's new bride and his mother Lily had a complicated relationship, often fighting for Hank's time and attention. On September 14, 1946, Hank Williams auditioned for the Grand Ole Opry after being recommended by Ernest Tubb, but he was rejected. After this audition, Fred Rose heard Williams and signed him to a 6-song contract, along with a record deal with Sterling Records. Williams recorded several songs for the label and had moderate success. Then Rose decided to find a larger label for him. Williams signed with MGM Records in 1947 and released Movin' On Over, which became a hit. Williams' relationship with Rose began to deteriorate for a time due to Williams' erratic behavior. He would often show up at performances drunk. In 1948, Hank and Audrey moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, and Hank joined KWKH Radio's Louisiana Hayride, a radio show broadcast that brought him into the living rooms of homes across the southeastern United States, appearing on weekend shows. As part of the agreement, he also received his own program on the station and bookings through the Hayride's artist service. He would perform on shows across western Louisiana and eastern Texas, then return to Shreveport for Saturday's Hayride show. In April of 1948, he scored his second Billboard hit with Honky Tonkin'. In June of 1949, Hank Williams moved to Nashville. He and Audrey made their home at 4916 Franklin Pike. In 1949, he released Lovesick Blues. The song went straight to #1 on Billboard, where it remained for 4 consecutive months. He then signed a management contract with Oscar Davis. Davis booked him on a Grand Ole Opry package show and negotiated Williams' induction. On May 6, 1949, Audrey gave birth to Randall Hank Williams. On June 11, 1949, Hank made his Grand Ole Opry debut where he sang Lovesick Blues and received 6 encores. He brought together Bob McNett, guitar, Hillis Buttram on bass, Jerry Rivers, fiddle, and Don Helms, steel guitar, to form the most well-known version of the Drifting Cowboys. During the same year, he joined the Grand Ole Opry's first European tour, playing at military bases in Germany and Austria. He had 5 songs that ranked top 5 Billboard Hot Country Singles in 1949, including Wedding Bells, Mind Your Own Business, You're Gonna Change, My Bucket's Got a Hole in It, which he learned from his mentor, Rufus T. Tot Payne, and Lovesick Blues, which reached number 1. 1950 and 51 were peak years for Hank Williams. He was one of the most successful country acts on the road. However, Hank's consumption of alcohol, along with morphine and other painkillers, severely compromised his professional and personal life. By 1950, Hank was making $1,000 a show, which is equivalent to about $13,000 today. That year, he also began recording as Luke the Drifter for his moral-based songs. Many of these songs were recitations rather than singing. The songs depicted Luke the Drifter traveling around from place to place, narrating stories of different characters. The true identity of Luke the Drifter was to be unknown, but Williams often performed the songs at his live shows. The songs only included Hank's voice, an organ, a bass fiddle, and Helms' steel guitar. Other songs that hit for Hank that year were My Son Calls Another Man Daddy, Why Should We Try Any More, Long Gone, Lonesome Blues, Why Don't You Love Me, and I Don't Like This Kind of Livin'. In 1951, Dear John became a hit, but it was the B-side, Cold, Cold Heart, that became one of his most recognized songs. In 1951, it was a peak year for Hank Williams with his Had a Call tour of the U.S. with Bob Hope and other actors. On the weekend following the tour, he was photographed backstage at the Grand Ole Opry signing a movie deal with MGM Pictures. In November, MGM released his debut album, Hank Williams Sings. Then Hank and the Drifting Cowboys drove to New York to be on the Perry Como show, where he sang Hey Good Lookin'. The next week, Perry Como came out with a cowboy hat and sang it again with apologies to Hank. On May 21, 1951, Hank Williams was admitted to the North Louisiana Sanitarium in Shreveport treatment of his alcoholism and his back problem, but was released on May 24th. In November, he fell trying to cross a gully on a squirrel hunting trip with his fiddle player Jerry Rivers in Franklin, Tennessee. The fall worsened his back condition. On December 13, 1951, Hank underwent a spinal fusion at Vanderbilt University Hospital. He was discharged against medical advice on Christmas Eve, wearing a back brace and taking more painkillers that only worsened his physical health. During the spring of 1952, Hank and the Drifting Cowboys flew to New York City with the Grand Ole Opry troupe to tape 2 episodes of the nationally televised Kate Smith Evening Hour. Audrey and Hank Williams divorced in 1952. The day after, he recorded You Win Again and It Won't Be Home No More. Audrey kept the Franklin Pike home and renovated it after Hank's passing. She added on to the house, making it much larger. Later, Tammy Wynette purchased the home and further expanded its layout. Tammy Wynette died on her sofa in this house in 1998. In June of 1952, he recorded Jambalaya, Window Shopping, Setting the Woods on Fire, and I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. Williams moved into a house at 2718 Westwood Avenue in Nashville, sharing it with singer Ray Price. Shortly afterwards, Price left the house due to Hank's alcoholism. During this time, he had a brief relationship with dancer Bobby Jett. Hank and Bobby lived during the summer of 1952 in a cabin on Martin Lake in Alabama. Their brief affair resulted in the birth of their daughter, Antha Bell Jett. Jett was born just 5 days after Hank Williams' death. Hank's mother, Lily, adopted Jett and raised her until her death. Then she became a ward of the state and was adopted by a couple. She didn't know that she was Hank Williams' daughter until the late 1980s. She fought for her paternity rights and eventually won in 1990, gaining a share of the Williams estate. She changed her name to Jett Williams. That may be another episode altogether, so let's not get too far off track. Following an unsuccessful tour of California and several visits to sanitariums, Hank moved into his mother's boarding house. Around this time, he met Billie Jean Jones, who was a girlfriend of Farron Young at the Grand Ole Opry. As a young girl, she lived down the street from Williams when he was on the Louisiana hayride. Now Williams began visiting her in Shreveport, causing him to miss many Grand Ole Opry shows. On August 11, 1952, Hank Williams was dismissed from the Grand Ole Opry for habitual drunkenness and missing shows. He went back to Shreveport to work on KWKH and WBAM shows and at the Louisiana Hayride and continued touring. When Hank was sober, his shows were outstanding, but that was few and far between. His performances were often poor, even if he showed up at all. In October 1952, he married Billie Jean Jones in Minden, Louisiana. The original wedding was held by the Justice of the Peace. The next day, there were 2 public wedding ceremonies held at the New Orleans Civic Auditorium, where over 14,000 tickets were sold for each. Hank's last recording session was on September 23, 1952. He recorded Kalijah, Your Cheatin' Heart, Take These Chains from My Heart, and I Could Never Be Ashamed of You. By the end of 1952, he was beginning to struggle with heart problems. He met Horace Toby Marshall in Oklahoma City, who said he was a doctor. Marshall had been previously convicted of forgery and had been paroled from the Oklahoma State Pen in 1951. Among his false titles, he claimed that he was a doctor of science. He bought a DSc title for $25 from the Chicago School of Applied Sciences. In his diploma, he requested DSc be written out as Doctor of Science and Psychology. Going by the name C.W. Lemon, he prescribed Hank with amphetamines, Seconal, chloral hydrate, and morphine, which only made his heart problems worse. The final concert of his 1952 tour was in Montgomery on December 21st, where he sang at a benefit at the American Federation of Musicians for a radio announcer who had polio. Hank Williams was booked at the Municipal Auditorium in Charleston, West Virginia, for a New Year's Eve show on December 31st, 1952. Advance tickets of $3,000 had been sold. There was a snowstorm in Montgomery, so Hank couldn't fly. He hired a college student by the name of Charles Carr to drive him to the venue. On December 30th, Carr and Williams stopped at the Redmont Hotel in Birmingham, Alabama. The following morning, they went on to Fort Payne and then to Knoxville, Tennessee. Williams and the driver took a flight to Charleston, but the plane returned to Knoxville due to bad weather. The pair arrived at the Andrew Jackson Hotel, and Carr asked a doctor for Williams, who was affected by a combination of chloral hydrate and alcohol he had consumed on his way to Knoxville. Dr. P.H. Carwell injected Hank with 2 shots of vitamin B12 that also contained a 1/4 gram of morphine. Then Carr and Williams checked out of the hotel. Hank had to be carried to the car. Carr later said Williams had severe hiccups, while the porter said that he had made a coughing sound twice. Carr then spoke to Toby Marshall, remember the fake doctor, who informed him on behalf of the promoter that the Charleston show had been canceled. Marshall ordered Charles Carr instead to drive Hank to Canton, Ohio, for a New Year's Eve day concert there. Somewhere around midnight on January 1st, 1953, Carr and Williams crossed the Tennessee state line and arrived in Bristol, Virginia. Carr stopped at a small all-night restaurant where he requested a relief driver from a taxicab company. He was just too exhausted to drive any longer after being on the road for over 20 hours. Driver Don Surface left the restaurant with Carr and Williams. Surface drove until stopping for fuel and coffee at a gas station in Oak Hill, West Virginia. It was there that the two realized that Hank Williams had already been dead for so long that rigor mortis had set in. Hank Williams was only 29 years old. The station owner called the local police chief. An autopsy was performed by Dr. Ivan Milanin at the Tyree Funeral House. He found hemorrhages in the heart and neck and pronounced the cause of death as acute right ventricle dilation. He also wrote that Williams had been severely beaten and kicked in the groin recently during a bar fight a few days earlier, and the magistrate Virgil F. Lyons ordered an inquest into Williams' death concerning a welt that was visible on his head. Hank Williams' body was transported to Montgomery, Alabama on January 2nd, where it was placed in a silver casket and displayed in the living room of his mother's boarding house for 2 days. His funeral was held on January 4th, 1953, at the Montgomery Auditorium, with his casket placed on a flower-covered stage. Mourners came from all over to pay their respects. It was estimated that between 15,000 and 25,000 were outside the auditorium, while 2,750 were inside, with a balcony set aside for about 200 black mourners. Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, and Red Foley sang "I Saw the Light," "Beyond the Sunset," and "Peace in the Valley," backed by the Drifting Cowboys. Hank Williams was interred at the Oakwood Annex in Montgomery, Alabama. After Williams' death, a judge ruled that the wedding with Billie Jean was not legal because Joan's divorce was not final until 11 days after she married Williams. His first wife and his mother were the driving forces behind having the marriage declared invalid, and they pursued the matter for years. It's ironic that Audrey and Lily did not get along when she was married to Hank, but they sure worked together to ensure that Hank's wedding to Billie Jean wasn't validated. As we know, Hank Williams' career has not diminished with his death. In fact, it could be argued that his early death only enhanced his legend. In January 1953, MGM told Billboard magazine that they had to reduce their planned releases for the month from 12 records to 6 in order to satisfy the demand for Hank Williams music. The label estimated the amount of back orders of his records and those by other artists would cover the Bloomfield, New Jersey pressing plant until April of 1953. In the meantime, MGM received over 3,000 requests for pictures of Hank. The company had to outsource their printing and shipping to keep up with the demand. According to Acuff Rose, the sales from the 2 Williams folios jumped from their average 700 per week to 5,000 in 3 weeks. The final single release on Hank Williams, while he was still alive, was titled "I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive." Your Cheatin' Heart was written and recorded in September of 1952, but wasn't released until late January of 53, after his passing. The song, backed by Kalijah, was number 1 on the country charts for 6 weeks. Take These Chains From My Heart was released in April of 53 and went straight to number 1 on the country charts. In just over 5 years, Hank Williams recorded 225 songs, with 128 of them being songs he wrote. 11 of his songs went to number 1 on the Billboard charts. On February 8, 1960, Hank Williams' star was placed at 6400 Hollywood Boulevard on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 1961, Hank Williams was one of the first 3 to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, alongside Jimmie Rodgers and Fred Rose. Audrey Williams died of congestive heart failure on November 4, 1975, at the age of 52. She was found just inside the steps of the Franklin Pike home she shared with Hank. She died on the day the IRS scheduled the home to be repossessed. Audrey is buried beside Hank. There's still a lot of Hank Williams' legacy to see in Alabama. There's the Hank Williams Boyhood Home and Museum in Georgiana, Alabama, that houses many personal items of Hank and his family. The Alabama Bureau of Tourism and Travel created the Hank Williams Trail in 2006, and Hank's boyhood home is the first stop on the trail, along with venues where Hank played music. He posthumously received a Pulitzer Prize in April of 2010. Ultimately, Hank Williams' story is a powerful reminder of a true American original. His impact is undeniable, and his music provides a direct link to the soul of country and blues. What's your favorite Hank Williams song or memory? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the legends of country music history. That wraps up this episode of Classic Country Backstories. I want to give a special thanks to Mary and Bill Vines for sending me some brochures and information on the Hank Williams Boyhood Home, Museum, and Trail. It was very helpful in my research for this episode. Until next time, take care, God bless, and I'll see you later.